What's going on, guys, and welcome back to F1 2021 My Team Career Mode for Season 4, round number 13, the Brazilian Grand Prix. So this one's one that we usually do pretty well at. It's one of my favourite circuits on the calendar. We've won here, I think, once before, and we've had two pretty decent races as well. So looking forward to this one. We're also once again going to be switching up the livery for this race and for the rest of the season. So the last 4 rounds, including this one, will be running this new livery that you see on the screen here. Just once again, thought I just want to switch it up a little bit this last season, because this is the final season before F1 22, which I mean is only out in a couple of weeks. So we're going to be switching it up once again here, but this will be the livery that we take to the end of this season. And as you can see, also this time I remembered to do the driver racing suits overalls at the same time. So new race suits for myself and George Russell as we go on to Q1 here. And yeah, got through Q1, but not as kind of safely and as nicely as I thought I would, to be honest. My pace here was honestly not as good as I was expecting it to be. Like I said, this is one of my better tracks. It's one of my best tracks on the game against the AI. I had some great races here and generally always been towards the top when I should have been. So lap time was not that amazing, to be completely honest. As we have a look here, Carlos Sainz goes quickest. It's a Ferrari 1-2 in Q1, so they're looking pretty good. We only just scraped through to Q2. Now, to be fair, I didn't get an amazing lap. My flying lap wasn't a great lap, but still, P16, it's not where I expected to be. And, well, we didn't make it through to Q3. We actually didn't make it through to Q3 on a track where I thought my pace would be pretty damn good. Now, it doesn't worry me that much, because when you see how close the top 10 were, it doesn't really bother me that much, because it ends up being very close at the top in Q2 here. But yeah, we just do not make it out. This lap I thought was a pretty decent lap, maybe could have been a little bit better in some places, and with how close it was at the top, making up a couple of tenths, which definitely could have been possible here. I could have got myself up into Q3, but alas, it wasn't to be, and we do get knocked out in Q2 here, which means, I mean, we have free tyre choice for the race, which I guess is a good thing, although, spoilers, we're just going to run softs, because that's pretty much what everybody is going to run up and down the field. And yeah, we are just outside the top 10, but still, I think this is going to be quite a good race still. As you can see there, we qualify P11, just behind our teammate. I mean, our teammate George Russell only P10, so makes me maybe think that our car isn't actually that great here. But you can see there's only 0.2 of a second, just over 0.2 of a second between 1st and 10th place. So it's ridiculously close. So this could be a good race, I reckon.
Formula One returns to Sao Paulo once again, with the stage set for what promises to be another classic Brazilian Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel famously clinched his 3rd championship here in 2012, and in 2016, Max Verstappen treated us to one of the finest wet weather drives of all time. We're racing today then at Interlagos, a historic 2.7-mile circuit, and one of the few anti-clockwise tracks on the calendar. 15 corners in total, 9 to the left and 6 to the right, with a technical middle section opening up to a flat-out Sector 3. And that gives us our best passing opportunity down into Turn 1. With me today, of course, is Anthony Davidson. Let's talk about Shaw. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
It's been a really solid year so far. There have been some incredible standout performances, but what's really impressed me has been the consistency. With this kind of form, I'm expecting another great race today.
Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. George Russell did very well in qualifying yesterday and will start today's race from pole position. And Antonio Giovinazzi lines up alongside. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Leclerc, Verstappen, Lando Norris and Perez, Hamilton, Joe, Shaw and Lance Stroll, Ocon, Tsunoda, Carlos Sainz. They'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. And Vettel, Lundgaard, Latifi, Mick Schumacher and Fernando Alonso, Gasly, Eilert, Matsushita and Nikita Mazepin. It's almost time for the lights to go out, so let's head down to the track and get this Grand Prix underway.
So with grid penalties for Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly, we find ourselves actually starting P9 on the grid. And George Russell does show that there is some pace in the car because he qualifies P1 here. So yeah, it is obviously there is obviously some good pace in the car at the moment here. So maybe we're just, I don't know, we just didn't have the greatest Q2 there, but I reckon we can make it up in the race because generally we are quicker in the race. And as we go here, we got a very good start. As you could see there, we went around the outside of Guan Yu Zhou through turn 1, turn 2, so that is a very good start for us. And we're just going to continue on here now, chasing after Lewis Hamilton. So already a position made up, and of course 2 places higher on the grid thanks to the grid penalties for Sainz and Gasly. Those two starting well down the order, especially Gasly all the way down in like P19. So it's going to be a difficult race for him after a very good qualifying performance for the AlphaTauri. And we're just continuing on here right behind Hamilton. We want to stick with these guys. We may be towards the back of the top 10, but that doesn't mean that things are all over here. If we just keep close to these guys, and as you can see, we're now right behind Lewis Hamilton, the 8-time world champion. We are right up his bumper, and we're going to see no DRS at the moment, but with ERS and just some good old-fashioned slipstream. He goes defensive into turn 1. We set the purple final sector. We're going to go round the outside, try and do what we did on his teammate at the very start of the race, but we can't quite get it done, and then we get a little bit caught out. I kind of realized, okay, we're not going to get that move done, but thought let's try and set up for a overtake down this straight. But unfortunately, I got a little bit caught up on the curb and didn't really make it work. But then we're really quick through the left-hander, and we're right at the back of Hamilton, but he's just slightly creeping away from us, and we just kind of back off to make sure we don't lunge too hard into the corner. And yeah, just have to keep that going for now. But a couple of laps later, lap number 3, we're going for the move once again. This time we have DRS, and we're round the outside before we even get to turn 1, and we're now up into P7. We're past both Mercedes cars, and now we've got the McLaren of Lando Norris up ahead to try and chase down as we come through here. Now of course Hamilton has DRS, a little bit of pressure from behind, but he couldn't really get close enough at all, so we're not really at fault there. But we do, not at fault, but you know, we don't have an issue. We do run a little bit wide through the next corner and have to go quite defensive to the inside to the next corner, but we can keep things going and make sure we get ahead of Hamilton and the rest. Christian Lundgaard ends up having a very, very unfortunate race here on lap 6. His engine goes up in smoke and will be DNFing from the race. Meanwhile, I think this is Pierre Gasly is making his way through the order after that terrible, terrible start. And he has now got around the outside of one of the Alfa Romeos. So he's looking to make an indent on this race, make an impression on this race. Lap number 7, you can see the rain is starting to fall. Now there was the weather update, the weather forecast for this race was that there was going to be a little bit of rain in the middle of the race, but it didn't predict it as that much rain. As you can see, the lap number 8, it is very much wet now, and it is for sure time to come in for the wet tyres. We've lost a little bit of ground to Norris up ahead and the rest of the field because they are just quite a lot better on slick tyres in the wet. When it comes to everybody on wet and intermediate tyres, it's very more balanced, but when it's, you know, driving slick tyres in a slightly wet conditioned track, the AI do have a little bit of an edge, obviously. It's just how it works with, you know, how pinpoint accurate they can be on the throttle and on the steering and stuff compared to a human, or at least someone of my ability anyway. So we came into the pits. It was a double stack, I think, with Russell, but I figured that was more than the best option to go for, because if we didn't double stack and went on for another lap on the soft tires, we were going to be way slower. And there's a few people out there proving my point. This is Nicholas Latifi in the Alfa Romeo. He's gone for another lap longer on the dry tyres, and as you can see, he's now holding up the leaders. Antonio Giovinazzi is actually going for a move on George Russell, who was the net leader of the race. Well, now that these guys have got stuck behind Latifi on the dry tyres, Giovinazzi is now side by side with Russell. Very, very slow sideways action here, but Russell is trying to make his way through, and he manages to find a gap and get past Latifi. But now Giovinazzi, Leclerc and Verstappen are all stuck behind these guys, and as you can see towards the end of the lap here, I've now caught right up to the back of these guys as well. So is Hamilton and Stroll and everybody behind me, as they all go flying past Latifi. I'm going to go around the outside of him because I felt like that was the better way to go there. A little bit too late, stuck to the inside. And now Verstappen and Leclerc going side by side into turn 1, but behind me is Stroll and Hamilton going side by side as well. Hamilton has lost a little bit of time to Stroll here and has now been overtaken by the Canadian round the next corner, but he's going to be right behind him. Of course, no DRS in these wet conditions, but Hamilton just trying to make his way back through, has a little sniff up the inside but can't make anything work at the moment, so he's lost a position. Not a good start to this wet phase of the race for Lewis Hamilton and for the Mercedes. He's now down to P7. We have made this work very well because we're now in P5 because Norris, I think it was just Norris and Perez who were in front of me. They also went on for another lap because they didn't want to double stack with their teammates, but it's really not worked out for them because they are now outside the points, and that moves me up to P5. Of course, I also double stacked. I was really the only one. I was the only driver to double stack with my teammate, but we were far enough back that it didn't really affect it. I may have lost half a second, maybe in the pit stop, if even that. So yeah, really, it was definitely worth doing that. We would have been way behind if we didn't double stack. And now we have a look at Mick Schumacher, just because in this point in the race, not a whole lot was happening. When you have a wet race, generally, I mean, it's exciting when there's a few crashes and things. Unfortunately, my Team Career series, this last couple of seasons, especially this season, there hasn't been a lot of driver mistakes and crashes, so it's really a bit unfortunate that, because it spices things up a bit. But yeah, not a lot happening in these wet races other than that though. People just can't do the overtakes, they don't have DRS. I guess the slipstream and the ERS is less, I don't know, just less effective, and we just have a few cars going around here. Before I was just showing you Mick Schumacher. He's actually in like P13, P14, so doing a pretty good job in that Haas. And then you've got Esteban Ocon here, who is just on the edge of the points. I think he's in like P8, P9, and he has actually got Lando Norris and Sergio Perez behind him, the drivers who didn't double stack and has massively cost them in this race. As you can see here, we are now actually catching up to the back of Verstappen. He's somewhat lost the tail of the rest of the group, but those guys are now coming in for another pit stop. So I was thinking, this is interesting. It's not dry tyre conditions yet, but they're coming in for another pit stop, but it's not wet tyres either. It's very much so still intermediates, and sure enough, they do stay on intermediate tyres, but they go on to another set of intermediates. Now, I could have quite easily just stayed on my set of intermediates, and eventually the track will dry out before the end of the race and we will be on to slick tyres, but I thought, I just don't think that's going to make for a very interesting race. I'm going to win it probably quite easily if I do that, because you can take the inters that long. You can take the inters to the end of the race. They don't wear like dry tyres do. But I thought that would be a bit boring, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to mimic the AI. I went one lap later onto another set of intermediates just to make things a bit more interesting. As Perez comes out of the pits on his tyre change, he comes out alongside Yuki Tsunoda but manages to get ahead of him. So that's good for Perez, but he's still outside the points, still not scoring any points at this current point in time. So very, very big for the driver, currently in, I think, 3rd place in the championship. So yeah, he's very much in the title fight here, but now Sergio Perez is out of the session. He's had a mechanical failure anyway, so it's no points anyway. Really bad stuff for him. That may be his title fight completely gone up in smoke, quite literally here. As we continue on, we're actually finding a little bit more pace on these intermediate tyres now. Russell had a decent enough gap at the front. Giovinazzi managed to kind of catch up to him, and then Leclerc's caught up to him. Max Verstappen's just off the back of those guys, and there's about the same sort of gap from Verstappen to myself, and now the track is now very much, well, not very much, but it is pretty much at the point now where dry tyres are going to be better than intermediate tyres, because DRS has just been enabled and we're on to a set of soft tyres for the final what, 32, 33, 34, 35, 5 laps? Final 5 lap sprint on the dry tyres. So we're going to see what we can do here. Lewis Hamilton, still, he was stuck behind Lance Stroll that whole time after losing out to him, I presume in the pit stop phase. But this time onto the dry tyres, and Hamilton's actually managed to jump Stroll in the pits, so that's good for him, because he's definitely got more pace than Stroll. Just got stuck behind him on the intermediate tyres, but now with the dry tyres, he's going to hope to pull away from him. As we continue on at the front here, not a lot going on, but it is still pretty close. You can see the top three here of Russell, Giovinazzi and Leclerc very much on top of each other. Bit of a gap back to Verstappen, and then a bit more of a gap back to myself. But Russell now under a bit more pressure. He kind of had this race almost, you know, pretty much won when we were on the intermediate tyres, because Giovinazzi and Leclerc just couldn't go for an overtake, too risky, didn't have the DRS. But now we're on dry tyres, there's a lot more grip and DRS is enabled, so Russell very much is he's very much under threat right now. He's very vulnerable at the front, and yeah, could be a spicy end to this race, as we are now on the second to last lap of the race and trying to catch the guys ahead. But I'm going to be honest, I'm actually losing a little bit of ground. My pace is not amazing, and I think it's also the fact that these guys pretty much all have DRS off each other, so I'm not able to catch up to them. But on going on to the last lap of the Grand Prix, Giovinazzi is going for a move on Russell for the lead of the race on the final lap. We've just started the final lap, and you know what, he's got the move done as they come round the S's section onto the next straight. But now Russell's going to have DRS. Leclerc is looking in the background as hell. He's squabbling all over the place. Russell back into the lead. Now Giovinazzi under fire from Charles Leclerc, but he's managed to keep that position, but he has lost out big time to Russell now. So it was looking there like Russell was going to get overtaken for the lead on the final lap, but he's managed to get it back again thanks to that second DRS zone, and he will just about manage to hold on. It was very, very close, but he does hold on right at the end with this big long straight in the DRS zone here to win the Brazilian Grand Prix. That's 3 wins for Russell as well. So myself and Russell, the only 2 drivers this season to win 3 races. So that's going to catch him up to us in the standings. We end up coming home with P5. Not the most exciting race, especially for Brazil, but P5 could have been a little bit better, but I think it was about as good as we were going to do. It was a decent race altogether.
It wasn't always plain sailing today, but a very important win nonetheless. Tell me, Ant, how did they manage to achieve this win?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, you can capitalise on other people's errors without making many of your own. And that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
A show-stopping performance from the 3 drivers approaching the podium right now. It's been an interesting Grand Prix, that's for sure.
So George Russell wins the Brazilian Grand Prix. Antonio Giovinazzi comes home in P2. He's having some better performances now, although the DNFs at the start of the season and a couple throughout, I think he DNF'd last race, didn't he, have completely put him out of this championship fight. But Leclerc, who is very much in the championship fight and is currently leading this championship, comes home in 3rd place. He's just being very consistent. He's only had 1 win this season, but he's been on the podium in almost every race. He's been very, very consistent, and that's what's keeping him right at the top of this championship with only 3 rounds to go now. We've got Australia, Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi to go, and then we're done. So Leclerc extends his lead to me in the driver's standings. He now has an 11-point lead on myself. Russell moves up to 3rd, now 20 points behind Leclerc, so 9 points behind me. And then Perez, unfortunately, falls back a little bit to 4th place, and he's like, what is that, like 33 points or something behind? So he's still in it, but it's going to be difficult for Perez without, you know, us top 3 having big issues in these last few races. Few changes further down the order as well. In the Constructors, though, nothing changes. We're still set to get the Constructors' Championship trophy, and I think, I mean, we've still not won it yet. Things still could change, but I think we've got a good chance of doing that. It's the Drivers' Championship that's going to be the interesting one. I think that's going to go right down to the wire. 3 rounds to go, 3 tracks that I'm not massively great at either, so it's going to be interesting. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.